Hello there, I'm the student, and today we have to talk about the most unpopular Tier 1 government type for republics, which is, of course, civic republicanism. And we also have to talk about how this government reform, with its special abilities, can actually be a really interesting alternative to a normal republic. So let's get right into the video and start with the revival of the civic republicanism. Okay, so first of all, we need to make sure that we are on the same page in terms of the first three government reforms, because they are very important for the calculation, of course, to understand how the results came to mind, right? So the civic republicanism has 3 bonuses and 1 minus. The minus is that you can only re-elect your ruler 2 times, okay? So he can rule for the first period, and then you can re-elect him once, and then you can re-elect him twice, and in the next election after that, you have to choose a new person, okay? That's the downside. The upside is every single time you get this election event and choose a new ruler, so for example the old one died or you cannot re-elect him anymore, you get not only the ruler itself but also a modifier that is tied to that ruler, and that is focused on their focus stats. So for example, if I re-elect the admin candidate over here, he would give me minus 5% core creation cost straight up. If I elect the diplomat, he would give me plus 10% trade efficiency straight up until the ruler death, right? Which is basically until I cannot re-elect him anymore. If I choose the military candidate, I can choose plus 10% siege ability. So you can see already these are only 3 of a few possible modifiers. I'm actually showing you the possible modifiers on the screen right now. Basically, all of these modifiers are really strong, okay? And then you can also choose if you want to have the admin, diplomat, or military bonus. And by the way, also if you have the tier 2 political dynasties, you can of course choose a relative, and he's also a randomized admin, diplo, or military one. So in this case, I could choose him as a diplomat as well for 10% trade efficiency. So you have actually 4 different options to choose a modifier from. On top of that comes that the civil republicanism also gives minus 5% all estates influence, which is a really nice modifier, honestly, as well as plus 1 a random candidate bonus. And if you combine that with the tier 2 political dynasties, you already have plus 2 random candidate bonus, and therefore you can actually choose, for example, the core creation cost one over here. And you can see that he is not 411, he is 431. That is actually the big power of this government type, because you have to think about it. If you are a normal republic, for example an oligarchy, okay, now of course you can re-elect more often. You can re-elect the same guy like 10 times maybe, right, if he lives long enough. But that also means that you have way more republican tradition that you have to spend from re-electing your rulers, okay? And you can see the modifiers, the positive modifiers of republican tradition, of insane reform progress, insane unrest reduction, are very good, and the negative ones, if you get below 100, are very bad, such as stability cost modifier. It's really annoying to have that, right? And that's why actually republican tradition should be valued way higher in this equation, right? And therefore you would actually need to take tier 2 republicanism if you are a normal republic. You have to take this reform, because otherwise the difference in republican tradition would be even higher. Even with republicanism, it's still an insane difference. I'm going to talk about that in a second. You would simply want to choose frequent elections for both types of government, either normal or civic republicanism. In both cases, you want the -1 length of election term. The numbers are actually the way that if you are a civic republicanism, if you re-elect him twice and then after that take a new one and so on, right? It is the same mana generation basically as if you had a 4-4-4 ruler. If you are a normal republic, you can re-elect more often. You will have a 6-6-6 ruler in the end, right? but on average, this would mean that you would have, for basically a 5-5-5 ruler. So the difference in mana generation is the same difference from a 4-4-4 to a 5-5-5 ruler. This is not really as much as you would think it would be, right? You can only re-elect 2 times, but still, because of the random candidate bonus here and here, the difference in mana generation isn't that bad. And then comes the interesting part, which is the comparison of the Republican tradition, because if you are a civic republicanism, you lose on average per year minus 1.6 Republican tradition. And you can see I'm gaining a base of +1. And if I had power projection, a base of +1.2. And then, of course, there are lots and lots of national ideas and idea groups that give, for example, like this one, 0.3 Republican tradition. So that would already bring me up to 1.5 in this case, right? With 100 power projection and this national idea, right? And therefore, I would actually be able to completely counter the re-electing, which I definitely wouldn't be able if I were a normal republic, because a normal republic with, of course, 3-year terms would actually lose 2.2, even with republicanism reform, 2.2 Republican tradition per year. And you cannot counter that. You will simply slowly drop lower and lower and lower in terms of Republican tradition, gaining less of the bonuses and more of the maluses every single year. And on top of that, you have basically a little bit more mana, but also way less Republican tradition. And on top of that comes, you don't have the ruler modifier. If you are civic republicanism, you have 1 mana per category less. But on top of that, to counter that, you have, for example, 5% core creation costs that you can stack, or you have plus 10% morale of armies, or you have plus 10% siege ability. All of these modifiers are crazy, or you have minus 5% idea cost that saves you a lot of mana. So it actually not quite equals that, right? But if you calculate the higher Republican tradition and this ruler modifier, on the one side versus 1 mana per category on the other side, then it becomes actually pretty close in my opinion, especially in games where you, for example, stack core creation cost, or where you want to reach higher government reforms way earlier and so on, right? So in games where you value the Republican tradition and the ruler modifier more than plus 1 mana per category. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed this little talk about civic republicanism, which I think actually deserves to have a look at and to play 1 or 2 games with it. So I hope you learned something new, and we are going to see, as always, on the next Monday.